So, folks, we're going to take a journey at 30,000 feet in the next 35, 40 minutes. I want to make sure that you have ample time to ask questions. You can do that at the end, or if you feel that there's something appropriate, yell out and let me know, and I'll try and address it as I'm going through this. Before I get started though, I just want to ask a few housekeeping questions for me. Can I just get a show of hands, who uses Twitter on a monthly basis? Okay, I've got about 50% of the audience. Thank you very much. Can you tell me who is a project program portfolio manager? That's the title. Okay. Who is a Scrum Master? Product manager? Engineer? Who have I missed? What else have we got?
Coaches.
Coaches. Coaches. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So my role at Twitter is as an Agile coach, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was how we've approached collaboration across our company as it's grown. But for the half of you that don't know, or perhaps aren't using Twitter on a monthly basis, I'm going to give you a really quick rundown of what we do. Twitter started out as a status sharing SMS service. So via SMS with your mobile phone, you could tweet your status, whatever you were up to. Eating a cupcake, having a cup of coffee, share it with your friends. At some point in time, Twitter turned from status updates to breaking news from around the world. And this was the Asiana flight that crash landed at SFO a year or so ago. Of course, the first thing that you do when you get out of a crash plane is you tweet it. Perhaps we should chat with this gentleman about that. But having said that, Twitter turned from status updates for what I was up to things that were happening around the world. Today, there's companies that also use Twitter to get a sense of engagement, to get a sense of what people around the world are feeling. Nielsen is one of those agencies. They do ratings for TV shows, and in this case, we're looking at the top NBA games, or the top sports, in fact, for a particular time period. And they learn what that is based on the Twitter engagement. And over time, Twitter's grown beyond the core 140-character platform into things like Vine, which is these hypnotic, repetitive images or videos that just continuously loop and loop and loop. So Twitter's branched out into a whole lot of things since our introduction a mere 7 or 8 years ago. This was from Arianna Huffington, and this is one of the things that really caught my attention and drove me to join Twitter. And what I've discovered over my short period of time at Twitter, about 18 months now, is that Twitter is 140 characters and so much more. So I just wanted to give you that context, because the so much more determines why we've got to collaborate across an enterprise. So all these moments around the world that are happening every day, they've resulted in engineering at scale. Our product has grown, our product has changed. And so that's what I wanted to give you a sense for before we go any further. So, as you can imagine, perhaps I should ask you, in fact, how many engineers does it take to deal with a service that delivers 140 characters at a time? Does someone want to yell out and give me an answer? No.
Sitting down and the other 139.
All right. So when you don't scale, this is what you get. You get the fail whale. And in 2009, 2010, Twitter, and prior to that, in fact, Twitter was experiencing this a lot. Or in fact, Twitter's users were experiencing this a heck of a lot. You'd go to tweet, you'd go to use the service, and you'd get the fail whale. It was basically, sorry folks, you know, the wheels are turning, but nobody's home. We can't help you right now. And so as the product grew from 140 characters sharing these status updates into people sharing moments around the world where there was breaking news, and you had millions of people coming to view that content, it completely changed the way that we approach engineering. And to give you a sense of the scale, here is where we were at the presidential election in 2012, right? Just after 8 PM PST, and Obama's on stage giving his acceptance speech. 15,000, just over 15,000 tweets per second. If you fast forward, not even 12 months later, August 2013, we were seeing 143,000 tweets per second, nearly 10 times the volume. And this, interestingly enough, was for a replay of a Japanese anime film from 1986 called Castle in the Sky. So a Japanese anime film went on television in Japan, and we had nearly 10 times the amount of volume tweets per second than what we'd seen for the US presidential election less than 12 months prior. The scale that we are now dealing with is tremendous, and it's constantly growing. And so I wanted to use this as an illustration for some of the engineering challenges that we've faced over a very short period of time. One of the things that we've done, starting from way back in the day, was using Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails, great framework to validate an idea quickly, get some value in the hands of our customers really quickly. Super important. However, as you grow, as you go from 15,000 tweets per second to 143,000 tweets per second and beyond, as you've got millions of people using the service on a daily basis, we needed to change our architecture. And so we went from one monolithic Ruby on Rails application into hundreds of services that were written in Scala. So the whole architecture, the underlying architecture of our platform, of our service changed. And we managed to get rid of that fail whale. We got rid of the fail whale, which was fantastic. We haven't seen any problems like that, despite certain LM tweets and edge cases. But for the most part, the service is 99% for all of our customers all the time, and that's fantastic. However, this has only addressed one part of it. We've talked today in a number of these sessions about the people, the process, and the technology. What we've managed to do as a company was get the tools and the technology sorted. We'd fixed that problem for the most part, and we need to continue to scale, and that's great. But what we're going to turn our attention to now is the people and the process. We went from tens of people to a few hundred people to thousands of people in the matter of years. And this is a graph of the network connections between just a handful of those individuals. So you can imagine, as you bring on 500 new people in a year, or more than that, what sort of impact does that have on the company? How do you scale the people? How do you scale the processes to make sure that the company is optimized and working at its best potential, and we don't have a lot of waste? And so that's what we are now going to turn our attention to. So the way that we've approached this, the way that we've approached addressing the people and the process problem is it starts, first and foremost, starts with the company alignment. The first thing for us is setting a vision for the company. What do we as tweeps, we call ourselves tweeps, what do we as tweeps want to do? And we have a vision of being the global town square. We want to enable people from Tahrir Square, Egypt, during the Arab Spring to communicate freely, to share their views and opinions, and to learn what is happening in their society. And we want to take that sort of ability to people across the globe. And so this vision of a global town square is really what unifies all of the tweets. It's something that everyone in the company aligns to, whether you're in sales, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in finance, legal, HR. It doesn't matter. This is something that we're all striving to deliver and achieve. So we've got this really strong vision for what we want to do, where we want to be as a company. And that's the first thing. The next thing that we take from this is our goals. And so I just wanted to stop here. Can I get a show of hands? Who is in a company that does quarterly goal planning today? Okay, about half of you. That's fantastic. Is there anyone here who works at a company that doesn't do any goal planning? And you want to admit it? Okay. So there's a whole lot of different frameworks for goals. You've probably heard of Salesforce. They use the V2MOM. Atlasian uses a VTFM. At Walmart Labs, there is the, oh gosh, I can't even think of it now. Something similar. Wall goals. At Twitter, we use a framework that we call gulls. Of course, at Twitter, everything is related to a bird, and so we have gulls. And everything is related to a bird, and that's why we call it gulls. And when I say everything, I mean everything. This is ostrich, a runtime statistics collection for Scala. We've got ibis, which is notifications, sending out SMSs and emails, things like that. Fortunately enough, Wikipedia has 9,721 species of birds, so we've got enough to keep ourselves sorted for the next few years. However, we're talking today about goals. And goals are our version of OKRs. And OKRs were first written down by Andy Grove in his book High Output Management from the 80s. They're used probably, do the people that do quarterly goals, do they use OKRs, objectives, key results? No. So goals, our goals are based on OKRs, objectives, key results. Where do we want to go? How do we know when we're going to get there? Right? That's the key questions that we want to answer with our goals. Where do we want to go? How do we know when we're going to get there? And so at Twitter, we have company goals. And the company goals is an entire process, or it's an entire framework for the company, I should say. Within that, we have objectives for the company. One, well, in fact, we have more than one, but objectives, and these objectives are things that span a number of quarters. In fact, objectives, some of which may span many years. Within each of those objectives, we have key results. The key results are things that we want to achieve within this current quarter. So we look at Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. What are the key results that we want to achieve within this quarter? Within the company objectives, we have group objectives, group key results. Within the group key results, we have team objectives, and the team key results are really what is supporting this. And quite often you'll find that a team may be supporting a part of this group objective, and indeed the group objective will support part of the company objective. And so it cascades down, and we align from that company vision, we align obviously, but also from the company objectives and key results, we're aligning all of the group and team objective and key results so that everyone is marching to the same beat and everyone's heading in the same direction. Now, the alignment is really valuable. The visibility is what really gives it the effectiveness, right? One caveat that I need to note, we have a quarterly rhythm, but we actually do continuous planning. So we don't need to, at this level, I think of it as it's Kanban. Obviously we do Kanban at the team level, but this is more across the entire business. We are doing Kanban. As we have capacity, as we can consume something, we do it. However, the quarterly rhythm is really valuable for the company to reset, align, check in with all the teams, see what's going on. And so the quarterly rhythm is tremendously valuable for us, although it is within a continuous planning framework, more akin to Kanban. Now, of course, this alignment is key, because if we don't have this alignment across the business, if we don't have this quarterly check-in, things are just going to go off the rails. So, we've talked about Twitter being more than 140 characters. It's now a number of products. There's ratings agencies that rely on the product. We've had to scale tremendously. The technical problems are somewhat solved. We've talked about how we've scaled our engineering from a technical perspective and how we are addressing it from a people and a process perspective. And it all starts with that company alignment, and we've leveraged some tools as well. And the tools that we've used are from a company called Atlasian. And so that's what I'm going to dive into now. It's key to remember, the global town square is the thing that aligns us across the business. This is what we are here to deliver, and this is the frame of reference for everyone in the company. And quite often when we talk about tools, people kind of, it's this negative reaction, like tools are not the solution to the problem. And they're not. In fact, tools aren't the problem at all, but they give us a way to communicate. And so I'll give you an example. We'll talk about that a bit more, but I'll give you an example of what this looked like before we brought in these two tools from Atlasian. We would leverage, we talk about providing status updates, we talk about providing visibility and clarity across the organisation as to what was going on. We wanted to build accountability as well. And so one of the approaches that we used was leveraging Google Docs, and on a fortnightly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, teams within engineering would be presenting, obviously they had a slide for their team, what are our quarterly goals? Now this here did not capture their objectives because their objectives spanned multiple quarters, but it did capture their quarterly key results. They also had their backlog. What were we actually trying to do in our backlog? What were the large epics? What were the epics in our backlog that we were trying to achieve? And down the bottom there you can see blockers, dependencies, if they existed, call them out. Now, some things to note here. We had some very passionate red, yellow, green traffic light conversations. One person's green is another person's red, is another person's yellow. It was really hard to have something deterministic around that and have a conversation around it. Obviously there were things that were done, there were things that were dropped. Dropping something is fine, right? We learned something. We learned something in the pursuit of our key results and we decide not to do it. That's fine, let's drop it. But we're generally adding stuff back in its place. Now, this was all manual, it was copy and pasted, it was sent around, and it was, it was out of date as soon as it was written. And of course, the same went for these emails that would go around. You'd get 100 emails on a Monday morning, it would be all these different status updates. How do I parse them? How do I get through them? How do I understand what's going on at my level? You're trying to write an email that addresses the engineering team, the project team, the executives. You're trying to cater to a number of different audiences and you couldn't tailor the message. So it was really tricky. Of course, same thing, as soon as it's sent, it's out of date almost immediately. A heck of a lot of effort and work went into all of these. And just like our site, when our site went down and it was a fail whale, this whole process and practice that we had was also a fail. It was not scaling as the company scaled. This process was not scaling as we scaled our people. And so that's what we had to go and address. And so this is how we addressed it. We leveraged these tools from Atlassian. And don't forget we had our company objectives, our group objectives, our team objectives, and the key results for the quarter within those. We basically split this up into a couple of key areas. Everything from the team objectives, the group key results, the company objectives, the company key results, all of that was kept in Wiki. It was kept in Confluence. The team key results is where we leverage some other tools. We use Jira, and I'll talk about why now. So this is the structure, and I'll reiterate that in a minute, but we did split this up, and for good reason. So we had Jira, Jira Agile, and Script Runner. And on Confluence, we had an add-on called the presentation macro, and that was to enable us to tailor our message to the particular audience. So, key thing to remember, the team key results became epics in Jira. The team key results became epics in Jira. When we have a key result, for instance, we're looking at something like this. Now you have 150 plus teams that are creating and recording their key results in the same format every time. Every team has a project in Jira. All of the key results are recorded as epics, and we ask for a couple of key bits of information. What is the key result? So in addition to what are we talking about, what is the key result? What's the outcome that we're trying to drive, right? How will we know when we're getting there? I want to increase my open rates on emails by 5%. Right? That's my key result, the outcome I want to drive. And we'd also target a fixed version. Now, Jira calls these fixed versions. We call them our quarterly boundaries. So 2014 Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, etc. There's a host of other things that you can use in the background here, and some teams use them, some teams don't. But the key things for us across every team in engineering was around the key result and the fixed version. Because this is what we wanted consistency and visibility across the org when it came to teams and their key results. So, no matter what team it was, they were always creating their epics, their key results, the same way. They then take that, and this is Jira Agile, if you haven't seen it. You know, same as any tool, right? These are just the tools we chose. The key thing was that teams would be ordering their key results. What do we want to deliver first? What is the most important? Now, you know this, teams ordering their backlog all day, every day. We also want the team to order what they're actually going to try and achieve first. What are they working on first? And in our world, it worked out quite nicely that a key result would relate to an epic. Something that a team could achieve or deliver perhaps in 1 month to 2 months, or even 3 months. And sometimes it does span longer. But ordering it in here was really critical because this order here was visualized across the whole company. We also had a specific workflow for the epics within Jira. An epic is just an issue type within Jira. And this specific workflow had things like, is it open? Is it accepted? Is it in progress? Are we waiting on an app store or a Play Store? So have we actually shipped something to Google Play Store or the Apple App Store? And is it shippable but not yet resolved and done? And so we could track across the teams and across all of engineering where every key result was, how it was tracking. Within, this is a Jira view issue page, and so within this, teams could go in, and this is where teams lived, right? This was not for the executives. And again, know your audience. So this was familiar to the teams, and we used the language that was familiar to them, fixed versions. Key result was familiar to the organization with OKRs, and we had all of that information in Jira. But as you can see, there's a wealth of other information here that teams could leverage to actually communicate internally as a team, but also with one another. What we found early on in the piece was that there were quite a number of dependencies between, for instance, our platform world and our infrastructure world. Or a feature team wants to launch a new feature, but they're waiting on capacity. And so they would use the issue links to actually say, hey, we are dependent upon this capacity request. Or we are dependent upon this legal review. You know, as we roll out features, of course, we also go through a legal review with our legal department, make sure that everything's sorted. So having the visibility into the links across the organization, remember that people graph that I showed you earlier of all the network, the connections between all the tweets. This was essentially the network, the graph of the dependencies across the organization, which was really valuable to visualize. Really scary at the start, but over time it's gotten significantly better because we've had that visualization. So within Jira we had the epic issue type. We prioritized the epics to show what was the highest key result, highest value key result. We had a specific workflow, screens, fields, links. All of this stuff enabled consistency across 100+ engineering teams, 150+ engineering teams today. Great for the engineering teams, not so great for executive leadership, for instance, or engineering leadership. And that's where Confluence came in as the tool to help us visualize our company goals. And so you can see here, this is a page on Confluence, on our wiki, and we had our company goals each quarter with an objective and with the key results within that. And this actually continues not only at the company level, but also on the group level, you know, the department level, and also down to the team goals as well. So each team, 150 teams, will have their own page within whatever part of the org they're in, and they will capture on that their objectives and their, what we call, you know, their key results, their epics coming out of Jira. Now the beauty about having this was all of this stuff was automatically put in place. It was all up to date whenever you wanted to go and look at it. If an executive or if, for instance, a director of a group that had 10 or 15 teams wanted to go and see what was going on in that person's, in their world, they could go and look at one page and they would be able to discern that really quickly. There was consistency, so they didn't have this cognitive load to go and read all these different status reports that were in all these different formats. And that made life tremendously easier for a lot of those individuals. Hello, yes?
When you say automatically in place, the thing that's been striking me is that there's a lot of data input, and that's a heavy, that's a different type of work mode, and it's a heavy load. Can you clarify that and talk about how you efficiently get through all of this?
Sure. So we, as a company, we wanted to record our OKRs. We wanted to record our objectives and key results. And we were asking people in each of these teams to write it down on a Google Doc or write it down on a poster or write it down somewhere, right? But none of those solutions had the visibility across the organization. And so what we asked them to do was, instead of writing it down on a piece of paper or in a Google Doc, have part of it on a Confluence page, but the rest of it remains with your backlog, with your team, right? Now, the onus in some parts of the organization would fall to an engineering manager. In other parts of the organization, it would fall on a product manager to write those key results and to keep that, or to maintain that. And so, we had to go through a process where we trained people how to do this, but I don't think anyone thought that there was more effort involved, because it was something that they were already doing. They were already being asked to write down their OKRs. Even when, if for instance we acquire a new company, they may not be familiar with objectives, key results. They have the V2 model or something similar that they've picked up. So we do go through a training process where we bring them on board and show them how we do this. But now that we've got the bulk of the teams on this, and it's only the acquisitive companies that are being trained, it's fairly easy to maintain. And of course we've got, all of you plus X hundred more people that are able to share their experience with it and help them.
Is there an API between Confluence and Jira that pulls all the data from Jira to Confluence, or is it like linked?
The beautiful thing about this was we got all this stuff for free. Right, so we got the automation, we got the updates. You can see the status here on the left-hand side. I'd know if it was in progress and the team was working on it. I'd know if it was shippable, as in it was in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. I'd know if it was resolved and delivered, or in fact if it had been resolved as cancelled, because we decided not to do it. And all of that came through automatically. So this on Confluence was more for the organisation broadly. You can imagine some of the teams in engineering, they're dealing with people in product marketing, for instance. This was a lot more easy for product marketing to digest than going into Jira and looking at a team's backlog.
No, I think my question was more like, is there an API from Jira that pulls in this information so that no single person would have to go into Confluence and manually copy and type this?
Jira and Confluence are, I'd say, integrated with each other, but they have plugins, so you can actually initialize this, and you bring it in from Jira, and you can configure a page for it.
Yes, they use keys. So you'll get a key in Jira, and you give it the key in Confluence, it'll automatically start sucking all the data out of that project key. Every project in Jira is given a key, and you align it to a Confluence page.
This
is a Jira person for hours.
This is it here, right? So we have a team. We have the Android team. So they have their own project in Jira. This is what's called a Jira issue macro, and it's a widget that lives in Confluence where you decide what you want to pull in. So I say, I want to pull in stuff for the Android team that's an epic, right? If it's got a fixed version of 2013, well 2013 Q4, 2014 Q2, whatever it is, that will actually denote that it is a key result that this team expects to deliver or achieve this quarter. And so that's what we're now looking at. And to your point, you've got keys, you've got summary, there's a whole host of information that you can pull in depending on the audience that you want to talk with or present to. And we focused on what is the key result, because that's what we were interested in, right? We wanted to make sure that we were recognizing the key result. And so what we'd actually do is we used another widget, macro, in the Confluence page, and that provided us this little view presentation thing. So previously we were using these Google Docs, and people would go and madly update these Google Docs every Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon, whenever their presentation was, to the rest of their group. And now, of course, this information was coming in automatically, and no one had to touch this page. And what you'd actually get, sorry, that's just a bit on how the page is. This is actually, these are all those APIs that you talk about.
That's what it used to be.
And this is how it actually looks. It is a presentation that is all built automatically. So we had the team name, we had what are the epics that they're working on in priority order, right? This is the most important. If something's going to drop off the list, hopefully it's the thing at the bottom of the list. What is our key result? Have we achieved it? Is it in progress? Have we dropped it? Have we cancelled it, right? So now red, yellow, green was not this nebulous thing. Now red, yellow, green was actually this deterministic thing. And we were having a common conversation. We had visibility across the whole company because everyone was using the same framework and the same standard. And we would actually use it in sessions like this. This is actually a session where we've got some remotes on the video conference on the left-hand side. And you know, what do we pull up? We pull up this page and we go through slide, 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 so that everyone can see what's going on in all of these teams. In this particular meeting, there was 20-something odd teams presenting. They're all presenting in the same order. Now this team here, for what it's worth, this is actually really, it's kind of like a collection of teams. But if this was one team of 8 people, this is way too many key results, right? But this is actually 3 teams of 8 people that call themselves one thing. But you can see that there's a few that are towards the bottom that have been cancelled. Actually on this one, I know it's hard to see, but the first 6 or 8 there are all in progress. So again, now we start to think about how much work are our teams picking up? How do they start their work? When do they start their work? Do they start it all at once, or is it as we complete something and we go on to the next thing? So we started to get a lot more visibility across the whole of engineering. So the Confluence piece was templates, which Confluence calls blueprints, templates for company and group goals and for team goals, and we use a number of these little macros to automate pulling that stuff out of Jira where we needed to.
Blueprints changed the whole game.
Sorry?
Blueprints changed the whole game.
Yeah.
Like, it really revolutionized it.
Made life a lot easier.
Yeah.
So we did the company goals. We've been running this now for, this will be our 4th quarter of doing this. And I wanted to now turn our attention to what we've actually seen, right? So more than 140 characters, engineering at scale, company alignment, how we use the tools to change our company, and what does that actually look like? So what we've seen is some great benefits across a larger and growing engineering organisation. We've got the consistency. Everyone's raising these goals in a familiar way. Incidentally, we now have all 150 plus teams that are using the one tool. So when you've got a bug with someone's product or someone's feature, we know where to go find their backlog. We just look for their project and they can create something or we can search for it. So the consistency across the company has been a tremendous win in and of itself in minimising the waste, the time spent communicating, right? The visibility has been tremendous because now not only do we have visibility within our team, within our group, but we've got it across the whole organisation. And so that's been really interesting from a sequencing perspective and from an impact perspective. Having this visibility, people are now able to ask the question, well, why are you working on that? Like, I'm your customer and this is my most important thing. And so it brought these conversations much more to the forefront. Like a lot of things, actually having this visibility helps you identify what some of the problems are. And finally, we had the accountability. So now people are saying, this is what I'm going to deliver in Q2. This is the key result that our team believes we can achieve in Q2. Are we going to get there? Now, having all this information in a tool allowed us to pull some of these charts. If you're not familiar with it, this is a cumulative flow diagram. The orange at the top here is to do. It's essentially the backlog of key results. We're looking at 1 quarter here. The green in the middle is what they're working on at the moment. And the purple here is what is either shippable or has been shipped. And we treat them as one and the same in this respect, simply because sometimes you can be in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for a little while waiting approval, even though it's, it's on its way out. So what you can see is that for this particular group, which represents a couple of hundred engineers, they basically set their goals at the start of the quarter, but there was a few things in the first week after or thereabouts that were also added. Some other things perhaps that came out of Hack Week, which we run at the start of each quarter. But from there on out, it was fairly stable across the quarter. We see at the bottom with the done that we have a couple of big jumps here in what's going on, and it flatlines out. Now, given that this is Christmas, fair enough. But there's a big chunk of work in progress in the middle, which is interesting, right? Teams are picking up a lot of work. This is really the thing that caught us, these big jumps in what was going on. And you could say that this was perhaps related or correlated to a release of our product to the App Store or the Play Store. This didn't give us the answers, but it certainly made us ask some questions, and we've never had the visibility to go and ask those questions in the past. The key questions that we asked about this particular group in this quarter were, why did we have these big spikes? Did these spikes correlate, like completing all this work, did that correlate with a release? And why do we have so much work in progress throughout the quarter? Is that really necessary? Now, of course, due to continuous planning, we talked about things do roll from one quarter to the next, and planning continues as well. But the team still had an indication of what they wanted to achieve. We also look at the cycle time for a particular group, and this is the same group, and you can see here that we've got where we shipped a lot of stuff, or where we resolved a lot of stuff, we have these big bars, and things that had taken us 50 days and things that had conceivably taken us 5 or 10 days. And so it was interesting for us to go and ask, why did we see this behaviour? Of the engineering managers, of the product managers, why do we see this behaviour? Is this what we expect to see? And here you can actually see at the beginning of the quarter, they're not completing anything, which is weird because this group should be doing continuous planning and continuous delivery, but they really don't. It's only in the latter half of the quarter that they deliver. So that was interesting. This is Group A. Group B tells a slightly different story. What we actually saw with Group B is that their backlog of key results that they wanted to achieve increased throughout the first month of the quarter, and then it got a bit more stable. But we actually saw a more stable work in progress throughout the quarter. The team's probably breaking things down to a size that helps them get it through the system, right? The throughput is better. And they complete things gradually through the quarter rather than in big chunks, in big drops. And so this was an approach that we thought was perhaps more healthy. And could we use this data to help educate the other group as to how they might become a more healthy group? And of course, we looked at the control chart as well. You can see here that this particular group, Group B, they were delivering all the time throughout the quarter. Some things, of course, are taking a long time. Some things are pushing the boundary of a quarter. But for the most part, things are in that scope where they can be delivered within 3 months. Not to say that we're going to start them at the beginning of the quarter and deliver them by the end of the quarter, but we will start them at some point in time and they will be delivered within 3 months. And again, an increase in the moving average cycle time up to Christmas, which was maybe to be expected, I don't know. We do let people have holiday. So, yes, sorry.
Those circles are stories, epics, key results?
These are each of the key results that are being completed and delivered. Okay. Yeah. If we were to look at this, and in fact we do look at this on a story, task, bug basis, again on that level we also expect to see consistent throughput. You would see a heck of a lot more.
This is the level above.
This is the level above. Yeah, definitely. And you know, the thing is with this, like when, of course, we go down and we sit with a team and we look at these sort of metrics on a team's throughput, they don't tell us the answers. They're just helping us know where to ask questions. You know, when we look at this on a team level, quite often the first place that I now know at Twitter to look is how long does your work spend in review? And if I see a team that's spending what I would perceive an inordinate amount of time in code review, like that's something that we want to address. And that's a pattern that we've seen a few times. So having this data has been really valuable for us to actually change the way that the org operates.
In comparison with the two teams, like A and B, are they the same type of engineering teams?
In that scenario, yes, they are.
Okay.
We also do have, we have infrastructure operations, we have platform engineering. They're doing different types of work, but we can probably more closely relate those two groups as opposed to these two groups.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's certainly something that we keep in mind as well. I've got all these hands going up. The only thing I was going to say before I finish was we're constantly looking for opportunities to improve. So we've revved this a number of times. We're iterating on the way that we do process. We kind of think of it through the lens of minimum viable process. What's going to enable us to scale effectively as a company? We're dropping some things out. We're adding new things in where they become available. But we're constantly going, what's going well? What do we want to try? What do we want to experiment with to make this better? And so that's what we do to collaborate across the enterprise and bring a couple of hundred teams together. I'd love to know how you guys approach this, and I've certainly got time for questions now as well. Hello, yes.
I was wondering what kind of governance model would we have, or organization you have in place around how you're using Jira? Like we have a similar instance, but there's not a standardization around it, and there's the question of how do I translate? I mean, I can see you're doing some things where they're using Epic for this other thing, and you got to communicate to everybody that this goes here because you're fitting into this existing box, right? When you're using Jira.
Yeah.
Like, so how have you governed that?
So we've basically taken a fairly stringent approach. Jira has a tremendous amount of flexibility, and we certainly don't take advantage of all of that. We have what we call the Twitter way, and that is the workflows in Jira, the issue types in Jira, like all of the things that Jira allows you to play with. For all of engineering, we keep that fixed, right? And we have the Twitter way simple, which is more used for our corporate teams, like our legal, our communications, marketing, procurement teams. They have, our corporate teams, they don't need a code review state. They don't need a merge state, for instance. So now that we have, one of the beautiful things about this is having that Twitter way allows all of our tools and automation to hook in with this. So from a story task bug level, when I move something from in progress to in review, there's a whole system that automatically takes over and starts helping out along the way. And so having that across all of the teams made it really easy to get everyone on board, because you do the training, you reinforce it a couple of times, and that's just it. That's just the way that everyone does it.
Yeah, Jira's got a great templating capability, so you can literally create templates for the different type of groups that you have, and then you take the workflow and you apply the template to the workflow, which then enforces the rules.
Yeah.
So people can't necessarily use it ad hocly if you don't know. It's extremely powerful.
Questions? What else can I tell you? Yes?
I'm about to finish. According to you, constantly reviewing and improving process, and I want to know what is your mechanism for making the improvement? For example, Team A realizes, through retrospective process or something, realizes that some other group outside of Team A, maybe outside of development, is impacting them. And how do you get that information and make an adjustment to your whole system?
Yeah, and sometimes it's not making an adjustment to the whole system.
To the part of the system.
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot, coming down to behavior of teams, collaboration. We really address that on a localized basis. However, there are things that have come up around this particular process that we've talked about today that you see the patterns enough, and of course everything is recorded, right? All of these, people, how do I do this? How do I do that? Okay, we've got our frequently asked questions about our goals process. Now, people start to get tripped up a lot on certain things early on in the day, and for what it's worth, we're on what we call version 1.3 of the Twitter way now. And so we take that feedback and we've revved it now, about every quarter and a half, to incorporate new ideas, new feedback, and then of course at that point, when you roll it out to everyone,
Yeah.
you have to do the messaging, you have to provide the training and things like that again. Yeah.
How do you incorporate that, or who's doing that?
So there's a team responsible for that, and that's the program management team. And there's a team that implements it, and that's our IT team. And so the IT team are the ones that manage and maintain the systems we use.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes?
I'm a bit, maybe we could have further discussion, but related to your company objective, key objective, then you went to your group objective, team objective, and team objective was equal to epics, right? So within...
Sorry, team key results.
Team key results, okay.
Team key results are equal to the epics.
But basically, within your organization, do you have one backlog visible towards, the services areas so that you can have such a visibility, or for you, the predictability of such a service is not that important because you have this updates?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's something I haven't actually shown here, but we do have a Kanban board,
Okay.
which has these, open, accepted for a quarter,
Okay.
in progress, shippable, and yes, done.
Okay.
We do have a Kanban board that visualizes that across all of engineering, and indeed for this group, for that group, for that group, for that group.
Okay.
So that's really valuable, because now you can, what's been updated in the last 7 days? What hasn't been updated in 20 days? Why haven't we had an update on this in 20 days? And now that helps us start bringing the accountability back. Quite often the epic in Jira, the assignee will be the engineering manager, whose team, we have stable teams obviously, stable cross-functional teams. So that's the engineering manager whose team is working on that particular key result, or focus on that. And then the product manager is the one that is the reporter. And so we, for the product management group, they pull out, hey, what are all the things that I reported on that I'm, responsible for? And for them, it might be 2 teams worth of work, right? And so we're able to pull these into different reports in different styles, depending on the audience we're trying to solve. And the Kanban board across everything is certainly one of them.
Good, thanks.
Well, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you at NJM on Twitter. Send me an email, and I've got the source for some of this stuff also on my website. Thank you very much.
Yeah.